happy to present Sister Rubina Niaz to you all. But last time on February 10th I spoke here. How many of you were in that program? MashaAllah. And almost everybody that day stayed after the program, and they talked to me, and they were saying they were very excited. But so far I have not received a single email. So what I'm going to do, I'm passing the sign-up sheets today here. Please sign up your emails and things so we can reach you. Because I am like calling my web admin and asking him, is there any email came in this account? Maybe it went somewhere else, and they are saying no. And I'm like, there were almost 50 people who were telling me that we are going to contact you. So that was the only thing I wanted to say. Inshallah, please stay in touch, and after this program, inshallah, we can talk about possibilities with whoever is interested. I have also brought my business card today, which I did not have last time. So if anybody wants to collect it, please, you're more than welcome to do that. Thank you so much.
Okay, so now I'm going to present our speaker. Sister Rubina Niaz is the founder and executive director of Turning Point for Women and Families. In December of 2004, she founded Turning Point, the first nonprofit in New York City that addresses domestic violence in the Muslim community and has a youth program focusing on Muslim girls and young women. She has over 17 years of experience working for both grassroots and mainstream nonprofit organizations, and has served on many boards. She currently serves on the board of Hartley Firm Foundation, Al-Dafa University Social Work School's Field Education Advisory Board, and the Social Work Advisory Council at Medgar Evers College. A social worker and activist and a fierce advocate of Muslim women's rights, Rubina has spoken extensively against domestic violence, both locally and nationally, and has received numerous honors and rewards. During fall of 2009, Rubina was named a CNN hero and was featured as one of the 500 most influential Muslims by the Royal Islamic Strategic Studies Center of Georgetown University. In March of 2011, Rubina was one of 31 women honored by Mayor Bloomberg during Women's History Month, and in May 2011, she was named one of the 20 first leaders of the 21st century by Women's E-News. Rubina will receive the Neighborhood Leadership Award by New York's Women's Foundation in October of 2011. Born and raised in Pakistan, Rubina has a master's in applied psychology and an MSW from Hunter's College, New York. So please help us in welcoming Sister Rubina Niaz.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm so pleased and honored to be here. And I want to thank Project Sakina and Sister Zarka. She really worked hard to pull this together, and it's her effort and hard work that brought me to Columbus. Now, I don't know if it's a tradition that is it generally like this, that there are more women than men in the room?
Well, generally there are more women, but it's not usually this dramatic.
Okay, so I hope it wasn't Turning Point that turned the brothers away. I hope that wasn't the case, but welcome everybody and thank you for being here. Sorry we were delayed a little bit, and the traffic at this time was bad too. So I was asked to talk to all of you about Turning Point in general, and also about the work that we do in New York City to respond to post 9/11 backlash that's affected the New York community. It's affected Muslims everywhere, and it's playing out in different ways, but the New York Muslim community is really bearing the brunt of it. And I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned by how we're dealing with things over there. It's children are suffering, people on the street are suffering. I can't tell you how many times I've been told to go back where I came from by people with heavy East European accents and what have you. So they look at you and they assume, whether you're wearing a hijab or not, you look South Asian, they assume you're Muslim, and you probably, somebody of my generation, probably doesn't speak English or may not be educated, and they push you around. And they're doing the same thing to kids, they're doing the same thing to people. I don't know how many of you know what's going on in New York City with the NYPD surveillance of Muslim communities. Well, that's something that we have been dealing with for the last 5-6 months, ever since the Associated Press story came out, and then it was layers and layers that got uncovered, and the film The Third Jihad, and how NYPD's commissioner was in that film. And I'm not sure if you take the time to learn who funds these efforts that are feeding the Islamophobia that's just totally gone out of control. And if you haven't done any research, and once your finals are over, I know you're stressing out about exams, do some research. And one of the groups that funded that film, The Third Jihad, is called the Clarion Fund. And the Clarion Fund is also a group that supports people like Pamela Geller and all the voices that are out there strong and loud, speaking against Muslims, creating this paranoia about the Sharia law and what have you. But I'm going to talk more about Arise New York, which is a project of Turning Point. And it was not in the initial mission, even though, and I'll share our brochures with you later, we ran out of Arise New York brochures. But, you know, I'll give you as much information as I can. And let me know when I'm running out of time so I don't go over. How much time do I have, by the way?
You have like 35, 40.
30 to 40 minutes. I do want to leave time for questions and answers.
Okay.
So I'll try and finish within that time. So Arise New York basically is a project that was planned by our youth members and our youth leader. And just to give you an idea of who is part of our youth group, it's really for young girls from ages 13 all the way to 19 and 20. So it's mostly junior high, high school, and some undergrad. And there are fewer undergrad students than their high school students, which means every couple of years they move on, they go to college, we lose them, and we start all over again. In 2010, it was late in the year when we got a small grant, very small grant from the National Crime Prevention Council to support our youth work. And what it entailed was, it required our youth members and our youth leader to go to Washington to attend a national conference where 80 other youth groups were participating. Youth organizations from all over the US had sent their representatives, and each had sent 3 representatives. They stayed there for 3 days. They got a special training in youth organizing and working with youth and all of that. And then our youth leader at that time was Shanaz. She comes to me and she says, well, we're supposed to launch a project. And I said, no, not we. You are supposed to do that. I have nothing to do with it. So they said, well, this is what we've been trained to do. And I said, well, go back to the youth members and find out if there's an issue that you really need to address and work on. And the girls came back to me after a week and they said, well, we found out that kids are being bullied in public schools on a daily basis. And these are teenage kids, boys and girls both, simply because they're Muslims. So young boys were being harassed and bullied and being called terrorists simply because they were Muslims or they were fasting. And girls, especially the ones who were wearing hijabs, were being targeted as well. And people who were targeting were their peers. And what it goes back to is when a whole group of people is criminalized because of their faith, then the message that the average person on the street gets is it's okay to target them and bully them. And that's what's going on. You know, with the Obama administration, some things are not talked about, but the policies have not changed. I can tell you this one. It was really, really bad in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, but it hasn't improved for us Muslims. And the reason why I think it's so important for all of you to understand is because this is about your future. As far as I know, most of you are going to stay here, you're going to settle here, you're going to marry here, you're going to have your families here, right? You're not going anywhere, you're American kids. And one of the most important things that we have to learn from African Americans and Jews and Irish and Native Americans and everybody. Native Americans had almost disappeared from the face of America, sadly, but that unless we become proactive and we push back against what's being done to us, no one else is going to do it for us. With the Constitution in place, with the civil rights in place, with everything in place, Muslims are growing in number, so we can't hide our faces and go away somewhere and pretend this is not happening and hope that Allah is going to take care of it and it'll go away. It's not going to go away. I just spoke at the university in Akron, where it was a hall full of non-Muslims and maybe just a few Muslim students from the university. And I talked about this and I said, this is not the first time it's happening to any group. We hope that this is the last time it happens to anyone. It's my hope and my prayer and my dream. I don't know whether that's going to come true or not, but certainly we need to learn from people who have suffered, who've been at the front lines before us, and learn from them how they overcame the challenges that we are facing right now. So if kids are being targeted and bullied in schools, that means once they go into colleges, things are going to get rough for them. What happens when you apply for jobs? So there's discrimination at every level. And somehow it's becoming socially acceptable as long as the targets are Muslims. So then what happened was our group came back and they said, this is a huge issue and we need to address. And our youth leader and youth members got together and designed a workshop that was about 2 hours. And they said, we're going to take this to public schools and public libraries and talk to non-Muslim kids and let them know how we feel when we are at the receiving end. So they would put in a skit over there, and they were planning to do this. Now what happened was, once they were ready to get started, none of the public schools were welcoming them, and they were being discouraged. Except for the schools that our girls were going to, they basically couldn't go beyond 3 or 4 schools. And they were becoming discouraged, and I was a little dismayed, and then we said, well, let's see what happens. And just during that time, this was 2 weeks after they had started, I got a call from this newspaper reporter from Metro New York. Metro New York is a free newspaper that's available at every subway stop and most of the public places. And this reporter said, well, I read about your work and I want to do a story on Turning Point and you. And I said, no, you're not going to do a story on me. I will only agree to you doing a story on Turning Point if you do it on our youth group and you focus on Arise New York. And she agreed, and she did a story, and within a week the story was on the front cover of Metro New York. And everybody in New York saw this picture of a young teenager wearing a hijab, and the caption said, "Why do you hate me?" And of course that stirred a lot of interest. Many of our funders saw it and read it. And the next day I get a call from the Central Library in Queens saying, well, we've just seen the story about your youth program and this is what they're doing. Can we schedule a series of workshops with your youth? So I thought it was a gift from Allah. You know, He answered my prayers. And so then we scheduled a series of workshops that the library organized, and young boys and girls would come. Some of them were Muslim, many of them were non-Muslim, and they shared a lot of their own stories. The Hispanics talked about discrimination against them. They were young Hispanic girls. There were African American boys. There was a young Muslim man who, about 20, 21, who became very aggressive and stood up and told our youth leader, well, what are you talking about? I'm a Muslim man, and I was thrown out of my job because I'm a Muslim, and it's true, they should all be blown up. Now, poor girls freaked out when that happened, and I took it up with the library, but, you know, that is also happening, and it's true that young people are getting frustrated and all of that, but we have to teach them how to respond to these situations positively and proactively, rather than fall into the trap of that stereotype that's already out there, the bigotry, the stereotyping, all of those things. So in 5 months, our youth group members had presented workshops to about 350 youth. And during that time, I don't know if you remember, a young Rutgers student, a gay man, jumped off the George Washington Bridge and killed himself because he was being bullied for being gay. The case is in the court right now, right? And People's Magazine was doing a story on bullying of youth. And they reached out to us. And our youth member is the only Muslim girl featured in that cover story of People Magazine, talking about how she was bullied at school when she first came from Pakistan and how her younger brother is being bullied. So we got a lot of press and attention and all of that, which is good, but the purpose is to do both, is to get the attention of people who matter and then get the attention of your community, because many of our youth members are being told by their parents to pretend this is not happening, to lie low, it'll go away or whatever. A 10-year-old kid came to our youth leader at one of the workshops, 10, or I shouldn't say 10, probably 12. And he said, I'm going to tell you something if you promise not to say it to anybody. And she said, what is it? And he said, my name is Muhammad, and I was pulled aside by a cop in the school who told me, let me check your backpack and see if you're carrying a bomb. And he said, I know he did that because I'm a Muslim and I have a Muslim name. Now I became really worried. I said, what is going on that this child cannot go home and tell his parents that? And he probably did, and the parents may have said, don't make a whole lot of noise about this. So many of the parents are so fearful, they're not taking this up with the schools. Somebody has to do it, right? And we have to then jump in and become proactively involved. Then what happened was that there's an elected official called Daniel Drum. He's a gay man, and he was bullied a lot when he was young. And he has become a champion against targeting and bullying of all people. He found out about our program. And so in Ramadan, our youth intern, who's 17 years old, is on a full scholarship now she's on a posse scholarship in Vermont. She had taken on as a youth leader intern during the summer. And she and the other youth members got together and they said, we are going to do a citywide workshop and invite non-Muslim and Muslim kids and talk about this. We did it in partnership with CARE New York, who did a Know Your Rights segment. And then Imam Shamsi Ali came and he spoke about not just bullying and targeting of Muslim kids, but also radicalization, because he's an interfaith imam as well. And council member Daniel Drum was at another really huge event. We invited him to come and speak at our event, and he left that event as soon as he finished speaking. And he announced it at the CUNY Grad Center, saying, I am going to Turning Point's Arise New York workshop. And he came and he spent more than half an hour with us, and he promised me, he said, whatever help you need, we will give it to you. Don't stop doing what you're doing. It's so important that we raise this issue and keep shining light on it. And then our youth leader, who had spearheaded the project, of course moved on to grad school. She's now the secretary of Muslim graduate students at NYU. And we organize a Ramadan iftar with the Queensborough president every year. In fact, Turning Point was pushed for that, and the borough president has made it an annual event now. And last year at the Ramadan iftar, our outgoing youth leader, Shanaz, was honored for launching Arise New York. So alhamdulillah, we've been lucky as far as elected officials' recognition goes, but I don't want to make it sound like it's really easy. It's about partnership building, it's about connecting, it's about maintaining relationships, it's about staying in touch, it's about knowing what is happening in the community on a daily basis. You know, when this NYPD story came out, we were all on the streets in Manhattan in front of the courts protesting against NYPD and demanding that the commissioner be sacked. And this is before the third jihad story came out. This was before that, because Associated Press had reported that NYPD has 250 mosques in New York under surveillance. They were spying in every mosque. FBI has placed informants in every place where there are Muslims. And what they're doing is they are entrapping, and they always find somebody from within the community or outside who pretends to be a Muslim, and then they go and they entrap young men who are 20, 21, often those who have a low IQ. And they trap them, and 2 of them are serving life terms in New York. And I don't know how many others in the rest of the country. So this is serious, this is really serious. I'm sorry, it's sobered everybody down, but the reason why I was invited to come and talk to you about this is because you're the people who are going to be in charge, right? And we've got to be ready for what is waiting for us. The onslaught is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. In New York, it's hitting us in the face every day. But yesterday, I read that Attorney General Eric Holder hasn't started an investigation yet, but he has said that he finds it very disturbing because the governor of New Jersey had complained to him, and the mayor of Newark, Cory Booker, protested very strongly. So now Ivy League colleges are being spied on, Columbia and NYU, right, and Hunter. And so the students then had a town hall at NYU just recently, I think over a week ago, talking about these issues. And they then urged the president of NYU to write a letter to the commissioner of NYPD and ask him to stop this practice. And they're being belligerent about it. I don't know, the mayor is defending him and backing him up, whether that's going to stop or not. None of this is going to stop, I can assure you. And I'm saying this also from my experience of working on domestic violence for a long time. I found a turning point in 2004. And the longer we stay in denial about an issue, the longer it takes us to do something about it. So you are young people, you have nothing to worry about, you're mashallah smart, active in the community. I would urge you to get involved at whatever level that works for you. And do it, please, because people in my generation are going to get tired very soon. And we want to retire. But we can't retire unless you young people are ready to take on the leadership positions that are waiting for you. So that's one of our goals as well. In our youth program, we train young women to take on leadership roles. We teach them leadership skills. We do public speaking trainings. Right now we have a series called Mecca to Manhattan, Muslim Women Moving Mountains going on. It's an annual event. So there's so many different ways, and you are living in a community, mashallah, that's very vibrant. I went to do Jummah at Al-Noor, and I was so impressed with the building and the people and how women-friendly it was. In New York, it's not always the case. There's always a wall between the imam and the women, so you can't see beyond it, and women are often in basements or in smaller spaces, and they're struggling. And New York has almost 1 million Muslims. And there may be 1 or 2 mosques that are women-friendly. Actually, there were a couple of more mosques, and then when I went back, I saw that they had put dividers and pushed the women all the way in the corner. And when I went and spoke to the imam, he said, oh, but that's because not enough women come. And I said, that place doesn't even hold 20 women. How are they going to come? They must have come and found that they don't belong here. So there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of self-reflection, I think, that needs to happen. You know, we often hope that somebody else is going to do it, someone else is going to make a difference, and I'll reap the benefits. It's never going to be that way. You know, we are Muslims, and we are reminded to stand up and speak out against injustice and oppression, and bear witness, even if we have to do it against our own self. So I think I'm going to stop over there and open it up for questions. If there's anything else that you particularly wanted me to address, have I left out something?
You were talking about White House Summit that was in which
Yes.
you were called. Could you
Yes.
tell us
Yes.
that what is national, what is going on nationally?
Well, there is a White House initiative on Asian American Pacific Islanders. And the founder of the Sikh Coalition, who's a colleague of mine, and we've done some activism to get together, his name is Amardeep Singh. He is one of the people who've been appointed to that commission. And one of the big initiatives that the White House initiative on Asian American Pacific Islanders launched is to push back on bullying and targeting of youth. And so they had a summit in New York at Hunter College. And I wasn't going to go. I was just going to send my BSW intern, go and do some outreach over there, because it was on a Saturday morning, very early in the morning. And I wasn't planning to go until I got a call from the White House initiative saying, you know, this Amardeep called me, and he said, Rubina, do you know that you're the only one, Turning Point is the only one who's doing any work around targeting and bullying of Muslim youth in schools and public places, and we need you to be there. And the keynote speaker was the Assistant Attorney General who works with Eric Holder. His name is Tom Menendez. That he's coming, and before the summit starts, he is having a closed-door, very private meeting with 15 leaders that they had handpicked. And they said, we need you to be there. So of course I woke up at 5 in the morning, and this was the day when New York had a freak snowstorm on 29th of October, and it was bitterly cold. And I was there bright and early at 7:30 in the morning. But I'm so glad I went, because we really got to talk to him one-on-one, and he found out about us and the work we do. And I think it's very important to get their ear, because they're with the Department of Justice. And if an investigation on the NYPD and all of this starts, it would be the Department of Justice who will conduct it. And I think we have a good reason to question that, because NYPD gets funding from the Department of Justice, and that funding is our tax dollars. And we need to question where that money is going. And if I'm paying my taxes to feed into Islamophobia, you know, then there's something very, very wrong with how we are doing these things. And, you know, civil rights and liberties and Constitution is supposed to treat everybody equally. So that's what it is, and hopefully, you know, there'll be more summits and some funding opportunities, I think. One of the ways to kind of get yourself noticed is to do some work on the ground, even before you ask anybody for funding. It always helps. If you've done something and you go to a funder and you say, you know, I've been doing this work for 1 year or 2 years, or Turning Point has been doing it, and now we need a grant to support this project, they are more likely to take it seriously. You know, we recently applied to Ben & Jerry's Foundation, and we never applied to them before. And we asked for money for our youth program. So we haven't got a response yet, but they've invited us to speak to them on the phone. So that's a good sign. So that is where we are with the White House initiative, but also because we are a member of SALT, South Asian Americans Leading Together. That's a DC-based coalition of 80 nonprofits around the country, that when they have their summit every 2 years, last year they invited me to be a plenary speaker, and I spoke about Islamophobia and post 9/11 issues, and a lot of people from White House and Department of Justice were there. So you kind of, when you're part of coalitions and you're working with other groups, then you get the attention that you need and opportunities, then you're informed about them. So that's something else that you guys might want to think about. So have I said everything you wanted me to say? I hope so, but let's leave some room for questions unless people are hungry and they want to eat their pizza first. And I don't mind that. Have your pizza and keep asking questions, I'm fine with it. I have the brochures over here, so if you want to share some, and our website is over here as well. So questions? Yes?
So what do you guys do when someone comes to you with a case of like domestic violence? Like if someone comes and says, my husband is beating me, what do you guys do?
Well, what we do is we provide a series of services, and they're listed over here. But if a woman calls, and our hope is that she calls us and the ACS, which is the Administration for Children's Services, doesn't do it. We want to become proactively involved, and we want to prevent that, but not at the cost of the woman's safety or the children's safety. And our address is strictly confidential, so nobody knows where we are located. And if you see our website or our brochures, we have a PO box address. And that is to protect women, our staff, our volunteers. I've been threatened a few times, and I've been sent messages by abusive husbands. One of them said, go tell Rubina, if I find her, I'm going to kill her. And I said, you know what, I can't stop doing this work. Allah is going to protect me. So that's the reason why we have to be in a confidential space. And when a woman calls, our job is to first determine if she's physically safe or not. Because if she's not, then she needs to get out of that situation right away. And if she's hesitant to call the police, then we'll ask her to call the shelter. And sadly, all of New York doesn't have a shelter designated for Muslim women. So often women run away from abusive men into shelters that are not Muslim friendly, that don't have staff that understand these women or their needs. They wonder why you have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and wash yourself or fast all day, and why do you need a separate private place to pray, and why if a dog touches you, you have to go change and bathe and whatever. So all kinds of things happen, but that's really the recourse for somebody who is in a physically dangerous situation. Now, if she's physically safe, then we'll ask her if it's okay for us to call her and what number we should call. We encourage women to call us themselves, because if someone else calls on behalf of that woman, we encourage the woman to call, because that's the first step often that she takes towards taking charge of her life. And she's been controlled and she's been abused, so we encourage her to do that. And then we invite her to come and see us for counseling. We provide, all our services are free. We provide them individual counseling, weekly counseling. We run a support group for victims of domestic violence every Wednesday morning. We do a lot of advocacy on their behalf. We connect them with legal services, whether they need immigration services or matrimonial services. We help them get orders of protection if they are in danger, and there have been instances where, because they got an order of protection, the husband was ordered out of the house and the children and the women stay. And then they don't know about the laws, many of them, even if they've lived there for a long time, they don't know that there are laws that govern domestic violence, and domestic violence is a crime. It's now a deportable crime, which I don't agree with, because I don't think that resolves the issue, but that's what it has become since 9/11. That if it's an immigrant, even with a green card, sometimes even a citizen, if he is arrested for domestic violence, he can very well be put on a plane and sent back, and the children and the wife will stay over here. So that's a serious consequence, and what happens often is the men will use it to control the women and say, what are you going to do if they put me on a plane and send me back? So those are the reasons why we really need to get involved in a very early stage. We do a lot of community outreach and education, So we go into mosques, we go into community centers, Islamic centers. We, for 2 or 3 years, were the only women's group that marched at the Muslim Day Parade every year with our banner high up and drawing attention to Asiya Zubair's murder and now sadly Nazish Noorani's murder and talking about it, and we are welcome there. And the whole idea is to claim that public space so that women feel safe coming to us and talking about domestic violence. And we also think that imams have to be involved and male Muslim leaders have to be involved because they will be able to talk to abusive men, and abusers have to be held responsible. If there's no consequence, they're not going to correct their behavior. And I don't know how many of you know that statistics show that if boys who have witnessed their fathers abusing their mothers, 70% of the times will grow into abusive men. And 70% of the times, girls who watch their mothers abused by their fathers will find themselves in abusive relationships or abusive marriages. So that's a huge number. That's a really, really huge number and really worrisome. And sometimes what happens is people think, and many educated people also think, that abuse is only physical. When physical abuse happens, there's a lot of emotional and psychological and financial and sexual and all kinds of abuse that has preceded physical abuse, oftentimes. I'm not saying all the times. Sometimes the first time physical abuse happens is when the woman is pregnant with the first child. So all those things happen, and we try and address them on different levels. And the reason why we work with young girls and young women is to be proactively involved and to help them understand that if they've made a wrong choice somehow, or if they've had an arranged marriage, they know how to identify abuse and they can do something about it. And we never tell the woman to leave her husband unless she's in physical danger. She decides. She comes. Some women have been to us for counseling for over 2 years, and they've chosen to stay with their husbands, but they come back and they say, you know, now I know that there are laws that protect me. I'm staying on my own terms. And the husband also realizes that she's not alone. Because one of the things that happens is these women are isolated from their entire support networks. Often they're immigrants, but many of them are non-immigrants too. And sometimes we worked with women who have converted to Islam because they married a Muslim brother and their own family has abandoned them. You know, they were Christians or they were Jews or whatever, and their own family is so angry that they've embraced Islam, and for the man that they converted for, he turns out to be an abusive man, and they are so lonely and so isolated, and some of them of course turn their back away and they don't want to be Muslims anymore, and some of them become even more strong in their faith, but they need the support. So we work with them, we create this network, and we help them just understand that they are not alone and this is not their fault. Because often when women are victimized or children are abused, they keep blaming themselves. They keep thinking it's their fault, they did something wrong, because that's what they're told. And the story is the opposite. So did I answer your question? It was too long an answer, but I just wanted to cover everything we do. Yes?
This is more like an opinion question that has to do with that. If a man beats his wife, do you personally think that he should be given a second chance? If a man beats his wife, do you personally think that he should be given a second chance? It's like your.
Can you speak up a little, please? I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
Should he be given a second chance?
A second chance?
Should the wife stay with him?
I'm not the person to judge that, right? I think our job is to help them understand what's going on. And if she feels safe and she decides to give him a second chance, and he, I hope, changes his behavior, then by all means, right? But what happens is, because this behavior is so reinforced by the denial in our community, it's unlikely that a man who's abusive, his behavior will change unless he acknowledges that it is his behavior that's a problem and he gets help. And often, in my experience, it's very, very rare that a man will voluntarily go for help. The woman is seeking help because she's constantly blaming herself, and she's been told sometimes by the imam, to go home and pray and be patient. And if you cooked your food a little better, if you lost a little weight, if you were fairer in skin, that's what men are telling their wives, right? Why have you gained weight? She's just given birth to a baby, for heaven's sakes. And she's killing herself trying to keep the house clean. So all of us have room to change our behavior, but the first step is to acknowledge that there's a problem with our behavior, right? And self-reflection plays a big, big part. But if she feels safe and she wants to give him a second chance, by all means. Our job is also to let them know that they are often doing it for the sake of the children. And it doesn't do the children any good. It's very worrisome, the impact. I work with children. I provide therapy and counseling to young children. Right now, I'm working with 5 children between the ages of 3 and 9. And I cannot even describe the trauma. I cannot even begin to tell you how much these kids are suffering. So there's a hand up here, and then I'll come to you. You were first, right?
So you mentioned how it's up to the youth, people our age, to step up and do something about these problems in the community affecting Muslims. But how would you recommend we deal with like fearful parents who are like, don't get too involved, and you might be on the list, or they might be watching you. You could have been the people they're spying on, and you would end up as the person in jail for life. Like, how would you recommend addressing that in a way that's productive?
I'll tell you, whether we speak out or not, we are all being watched. Everybody. All of us are under surveillance, right? So that's happening whether we don't do anything about it or we do something about it. Now, I think parents need to understand that there's power in numbers. If most of us went into hiding, then people who are trying to do this to us have succeeded, right? They're trying to plant fear in everybody's mind. And if we've allowed that fear to shut us out, then they have won, right? So parents need to understand that as well. And also, I think what some of you can help them understand through your Islamic centers, through your colleges, by having events like this and inviting your parents and talking about the serious consequences of what might happen if nothing is done about it. It's already happening. So either we live with the consequences, and do they want that for their children? I don't think so. None of us want our kids to suffer. We want them to live free lives in this country and have the freedom to practice their religion, practice their deen, be who they are, and they are law-abiding citizens. So if I often say that when a domestic violence incident hits the media and the abuser happens to be a Muslim man, can you guess what happens? It's called an act of terrorism. And I have taken a lot of flack from my community, especially from Pakistani men my generation, who've been so critical and cynical about my work, and they've been angry. And they said, why are you doing this? Aren't we in enough trouble? You're shining light on a negative issue. And I say, well, we are in bigger trouble if we don't recognize this is happening and we're not doing anything about it. Just post 9/11, I took to the streets on the 13th of September. None of my family lives in the US. I'm a single woman. And I was one of the 5 activists on the streets protesting against the detention of Muslim men. For 10 months, every Saturday, I used to be outside the Metropolitan Detention Center protesting. If there were 500 protesters, 5 of us would be Muslims. And all the men who were detained over there were Muslim men. And I used to go to bed every night thinking FBI is going to break down my door and they're going to arrest me. And then I said, let them do it. Let them do it. It'll make great headlines, right? A Muslim woman. I organized the first peace rally in Manhattan 2 weeks after 9/11. Right? The media didn't cover it. Why? Because it was a Muslim doing it. Should we stop doing what we are doing? I don't think so. But parents, I would say that go to some of the older people in the community who agree with you, and then work together and organize workshops and organize panels, invite people from CARE, from wherever you can get them, and have them come down and talk to you and your parents about what's going on. I think part of what is going on is we're not connecting the dots. So somehow we feel, oh, this happened in Florida, this happened in New York, so we are safe. Nobody is safe. None of us are safe. So we may as well do this together and make sure that, they know how many voices out there are screaming.
Can we break for food and then we'll
Sure.
go back to...
Can I just take her question?
Sure.
And then we can break.
I know you straight to the topic of domestic violence now, but back to bullying, how do you approach children about it? Like you guys mentioned that you went to schools, but I'm assuming most of those are high schools because that's usually when it starts. But do you guys ever go to elementary schools and to younger children? And how do you, if you do, how do you talk to them about it? How do you tell them
We
what's
generally doing workshops for junior high and high school kids, because that's where a lot of bullying is happening. But the best way to do it is to involve community leaders and open discussions in the mosque, in Islamic centers. And the children need to, just like victims of domestic violence, these children need to know that they're not alone and they're not isolated and that it's safe for them to talk about it. And then the older people should go to the schools and talk to what's happening in New York is teachers are not doing anything about it. Social workers don't want to deal with it. And so unless the students become proactively involved themselves, and that's what we teach these kids, is you can go to your social worker, your guidance counselor, your principal, whoever, and talk about bullying, and talk about what's going on in schools, and demand that something be done about it. Now, if it really has to be with the parents as well, because the parents have to encourage the children, and the parents have to go to the school and talk to the school, because the school is responsible for everybody's safety, and even more so for Muslim kids, because they're being targeted so much. But I think the whole idea is to create safe spaces, whether it's for teens or children or women or men or whoever. That once we have that sense of safety among the people, then they'll feel comfortable talking. So I think that a lot of onus is on us and how we create those spaces. Okay. I think it's time for their dinner.
Inshallah, we can do question and answer.
Sure, absolutely. So thank you. I just pass these around. So. Thank you, young brothers, for being here and for listening. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Wait a minute, what you trying to imply?